Wind scours the desert floor, carving deep furrows into the shifting dunes. Beneath the grit, the jagged edge of a stone altar breaks the surface, worn smooth by centuries of silence. As the sun dips below the horizon, the sand begins to dissolve. The desert floor gives way to steel and glass, rising from the bedrock like a sudden, metallic forest. Skyscrapers pierce the twilight, their neon signs flickering to life where torches once burned. This is Seoul. The city pulses with electricity, a grid of light and motion, yet deep beneath the subway tunnels, the original stone foundation remains untouched. In the basement of a quiet museum, the air grows heavy. A jade ornament rests inside a glass case, its surface marred by a single jagged crack running down the center. The museum is empty, the lights are dimmed. Then, the jade begins to shift. It does not move, but it pulses. A golden rhythm emanates from the stone, a steady, low-frequency thrum that vibrates through the display case. The ornament waits. Min-soo stepped into the basement, his footsteps muffled by the thick concrete floor. He had come for the archives, but the air here felt different, charged with a static weight that made the hair on his arms stand up. He stopped. The low hum was no longer a vibration in the floor, it was a physical pressure against his eardrums. He turned toward the center of the room. The jade ornament sat inside its glass housing, glowing with a rhythmic, golden intensity that defied the dim lighting. Min-soo moved closer, his breath hitching in his chest. The hum grew into a drone, a sound that seemed to originate from inside his own skull. He reached out, his hand trembling. His finger hovered just inches from the cool glass. Suddenly, the jade flared. A bolt of golden light shattered the silence, leaping from the stone, passing through the glass, and striking his skin. He gasped, jerking his hand back, as if burned. The room erupted. 1,000 voices began to whisper in unison, a cacophony of overlapping tongues that filled every corner of the basement. Min-soo locked his apartment door and went straight to the desk. His hands were still shaking, but the golden mark on his skin had faded into a faint, shimmering map of veins. He pulled the digital microscope toward him and prepared a fresh slide. He pricked his finger, placed a single drop of blood under the lens, and adjusted the focus dial. The monitor flickered to life. At first, the standard double helix appeared, familiar and stable. He leaned in, squinting at the screen. Then, the base pairs began to shudder. They did not break. They detached and drifted like iron filings in a magnetic field. Min-soo tapped the monitor, thinking it was a glitch, but the movement accelerated. The nucleotides twisted, locking into sharp, angular shapes. They were no longer biological markers. They were ancient characters from the Cheongbuk-gyeong, glowing with a soft, amber light. The entire structure pulsed. It expanded, then contracted, a rhythmic cycle that mimicked the beating of a heart. Min-soo watched, paralyzed, as his own genetic blueprint rewrote itself in real time. The screen illuminated his face, casting long shadows against the walls. There was no pain, only a profound sense of realignment. The code was breathing. It was alive. The biological change did not remain contained. It rippled outward, a shockwave of latent potential crossing oceans and borders. In a dusty field in Mesopotamia, a farmer dropped his plow as his irises flooded with molten gold. In a high-tech laboratory in Geneva, a scientist stared at her monitor, watching her own pupils flare with an amber fire that defied medical explanation. Across the Americas, a native elder stood on a cliff edge, arms outstretched to the morning sun, his gaze burning with the same celestial intensity. 12 distinct points of light ignited across the continents at the exact same moment. These people, separated by thousands of miles, turned their heads toward the rising sun. From the vantage point of space, the Earth began to transform. 12 golden beams erupted from the surface, piercing the atmosphere like solid pillars of light. As they climbed, the beams began to arc, bending toward one another with calculated precision. They wove together, interlocking in a complex, geometric dance. High above the clouds, the light coalesced into a massive, shimmering mandala. The Earth was no longer a dark sphere, it was a glowing, blooming flower of light. The mandala held its form, a perfect, glowing flower of energy locked in the upper atmosphere. Then, the golden lines shifted. They flowed and rearranged, shedding their geometric rigidity to form elegant, radiant characters that hung in the sky. The script was unmistakable, burning with a soft, steady brilliance visible from every corner of the globe. Bring benefit to all humanity. The words did not just sit in the air, they radiated. A wave of golden light cascaded downward, washing over every continent, every city, and every forest. The light did not burn. It clarified. It penetrated the atmosphere, settling into the bedrock and the streets, erasing the shadows of the old world. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and for the first time, the entire world stood under a single, luminous promise.